And I quote, "I'll be there in a minute. Give me a second."
Time is relative, folks. Time is relative.
Yes. So, hey, cheers to everybody in the chat.
They're a division rival. I don't care how many wins they get. Screw them.
That wasn't the take I was expecting to hear.
I want to gush over watching live Chris Tanev.
I think that we completely underestimate the skill it takes to play defense.
One highlight or several highlights does not a Calder trophy make.
I'm stepping in here. I'm going to be the crotchety old man here. They need to learn patience. They need to understand the tension, everything, and the drama.
How dare! Look at this. How is McDavid not getting a penalty?
You guys need to calm down with this, okay? You guys need to calm down with it.
Calming down. Yeah, I think we did do a little bit of calming down over the Canucks this past week because there's not Canucks games to watch anymore. That really sucks.
Just like this big hole has opened up in our lives.
But it's also still mind blowing that we're having this conversation in the late May. And the Canucks only just stopped playing hockey, so it was lots of positives this season, and we'll get into them throughout this episode. Welcome to the Shifts and Pucks podcast. I am joined by Chris. Chris, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How about you?
Good, thank you. Good. And Tyler is back. Tyler, how you doing?
Hello, Sean. Hello, Chris. It's still, we've had some time to settle over it. Obviously, anytime going out in a Game 7 leaves you with a lot of what could have been feelings, but it was a fun year, wasn't it?
It definitely was, and I think I remember going into the playoffs saying like, everything is house money now, but you're still disappointed after losing in Game 7. They made a game of it after having a tough start to that game. Also, if I would have told you that Thatcher Demko was going to be injured after Game 1 of the playoffs and the Canucks would go to Game 7 in round 2 against the Oilers, how crazy would you have called me?
I would have asked who's having a bubble-esque playoff.
I mean, that is kind of fitting how it went that way, isn't it, Chris? Obviously after that news, after the first Nashville game, I think most fans felt the same way. Like, there go our hopes. You hold this faint hope that the backup can somehow push you along, or that maybe the next.
You'd be so resilient that you were just waiting for that next comeback, that next cardiac kid moment.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen past examples where a goalie kind of bursts onto the scene by injury in the playoffs, and then they go on a big run, and but it was how realistic is that, right? So it was pretty low feeling, and then suddenly there's just magical win after magical win. Now they're through the first round, and then all this house money talk. I mean, that is just gone now. It's about the Stanley Cup at this point, right? So that's kind of and that's the ups and downs as a fan going through an experience like that. 13 out of a possible 14 games it could have played over the first 2 rounds. And the schedule in the second round was every other day. So just as you're catching your breath from the night before, you're right back at it again, it seems like. And yeah, unfortunately, the magic ran out. Unfortunately, health became an issue. We can get into the Brock Besser thing, I'm sure, but that news not only had an actual effect on the lineup and the power play in particular, but I think mentally it was pretty crushing news that they were going to have trouble recovering from.
Yeah, as far as just general sentiment before we start getting into the nitty-gritty, I am so proud of the team and the boys. Like, the season that they had, no one was expecting that. Not even the biggest Canuck homers were expecting the season that we just watched. So the fact that they were able to get as far as they did and perform as well as they did throughout this past season. Like I couldn't be more proud. And like we've seen on social media, the general sentiment is like Vancouver loves the Canucks again. And to actually see the city rally around the team like that again, we hadn't seen that in a decade. So yeah, I'm just couldn't be more proud, but obviously it's still bittersweet now that it's done.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think part of what I'm taking from this is I took for granted the playoff atmosphere at Rogers Arena back in the late 90s or in the early 2000s, where they were in the playoffs pretty regularly, not having it for so long and not even having just coming back and the goosebumps you get when the Streets Have No Name hits. And
is this where I get to say I told you so?
Yeah. Yeah, I have to take the L on that too. It wasn't like I disliked it. I just felt like, new generation of fans. It's been a long time since that.
I think you guys were more like neutral and open to change, where I was like, no, I want my sentimental feelings back.
Yeah. But no, as soon, the first game, as soon as that was going and you got the kid at center ice and they're coming out of the tunnel and the towels, it just all seemed right, And there's something to be said about that.
And as much as people lament people like always having their cell phone out and recording, just seeing some of the fan reactions of that moment of, oh my God, they're playing it again. And everyone just losing their goddamn minds.
Honestly, even just at home, you got the TV cranked up and that's it. You've got your jersey on and you've got your adult beverage open and you're there and that's coming through the screen. It's just like, whew, like the butterflies start to happen. And no, it was the right call to stick with that.
Yeah. In the Canucks versus Oilers, there wasn't much separating those two teams in that series. Shelovs played really well again. The Canucks were able to chase Stuart Skinner for at least a couple games, but he came back and was good enough in Game 7. Although the Canucks weren't good enough for most of that game to test him.
Probably the back half of Game 6 as well.
Yeah. So that's, I think, in terms of anything with that series, I think it's just feel like if there's anything that is a lost opportunity, is the fact that they just weren't able to show up and. I don't want to say show up's the right word, but like provide enough offensive opportunities for themselves to close out that series.
Yeah, whether it's just overall fatigue or injuries, like maybe a combination of all of that, but like just the fact that they kind of, at least from an like outsider watching appearance wise, like it just felt like they kind of petered out at the end.
Yeah, petered out. It's a good way of putting it. It can be frustrating at the time as a fan to feel like that's a full effort. I really hate the idea of effort, suggesting that the guys don't care. It's about the Stanley Cup. Are you kidding me? They don't care. The other team's trying
it's physical fatigue at that point. Yeah. It's not lack of give a shit.
The other team's trying mental. To. Like, you just sometimes are going to not have enough. And that's what happened, and unfortunately, it kind of felt like that was coming, didn't it? Like you saw how Game 6 went. I hate to reference 2011 because it was so long ago, but Game 6 and 7, not exactly the same thing in that Stanley Cup final, but I was hard not to have the same feeling about this context.
The high of Game 5 and then the come down feeling of Game 6 and Game 7, I very much know what you're talking about there.
And even Game 5, Chris, like the Canucks barely pull that out at the end and for a 1-goal win and Game 5
I was pacing that entire third period of Game 5.
Yeah, Game 5 against Boston was 1-0 with a sharp angle shot from Max Lapierre there, and that seemed like that was going to be hopeless too. And then so yes, you're in position to clinch, but it's almost cruel because like they weren't actually that close, in reality, when you step back now here a few days later and look at the whole thing.
And I know we'll probably get more into this, but just like credit where it's due. The Oilers have had playoff disappointments for however many years in a row while being a good playoff team. So they had that built-in playoff experience and basically knowing when they kind of needed to get that clutch moment of like hitting the gas and just, being clutch in those moments. And they got the job done. The Canucks didn't.
It was a well-earned series win for the Oilers. I mean, we have to. I think we got to be able to admit that they did a lot of things right. They obviously what I like to joke around with, the Edmontoning on their defense have popped up at times. I mean, even in the last game, just one bad giveaway and suddenly they're in trouble, and it was 3-2. I wondered about when they pulled Skinner before the third period in game 4, whether that was kind of knee jerk, and because then it's going to dominate the news cycle between games. They did go to Calvin Pickard for the next couple of games. They won one, lost one, went back to Skinner. In the end, their handling of the goaltending was successful, and I think it was some of it was just throwing a different look at the Canucks, and it seemed to was enough to get them through to the next round and get back in the series. So.
Yeah, I think I disagree with the fact that you say that it wasn't close. I think it was. I just think that there was just it
wasn't that close. Like, I mean, as much as it felt like at the time, it was still a competitive series and very close.
Yeah.
In terms of the evenness of the teams, but coming out of game 5 and then just having one win to go still, I mean, I think easy to overlook maybe a few things along the way.
Yeah, I think one thing that wasn't overlooked was the lack of production from the power play.
Yeah.
And that
definitely.
is one spot that they definitely need to take a look at and figure out how to just find like, all they needed was like one or two key goals out of that power play, and the series is different.
Yeah,
right?
I think they were talking about either on 32 Thoughts or on Halford and Brough during the series. They were talking about if the power play was at the clip that it was in the regular season at I think it was 21 or 22%. They're like, if you had that same percentage in the playoffs, that's 4 or 5 extra goals over a 7-game series.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think if I'm going to take anything away from that series, is the difference was the special teams, and specifically the Oilers PK versus the Canucks power play.
Yeah,
because the Canucks actually shut down the Oilers power play for the second half of that series.
Yeah, and it's funny how that goes too, because a lot of the narrative going in would have been about how deadly the Oilers power play was, and whether that was going to win them the series, when in fact it was the other side of it that kind of did in the Canucks. And they conceded that after Game 7. Rick Tocchet admitted that. I think Quinn Hughes as well. Not being able to get something off that double minor was deflating. No question. But for a power play that was already struggling to lose Brock Besser, their trigger guy, and then to then go with a different configuration. I mean, they looked lost on that power play most of the game.
Yeah.
Couldn't even gain the line. Couldn't get a shot on goal. It was painful to watch. Yes,
it was very frustrating to watch. But even before Brock Besser went down, it still didn't fill you with confidence when the Canucks got a power play.
No.
But credit to the
it's can we wave it off? Can we just deny? Decline, just keep going.
Yeah, the amount of times I saw that on Twitter of can we just not take the power play and just keep it at 5-on-5?
Imagine they do the announce, high sticking, declined, face off down there, keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was reaching that point, sadly.
Mm-hmm.
But credit to the penalty kill, though. Like we already were talking about, the fact that the Canucks penalty kill was able to neutralize the deadly, lethal Oilers power play on the back half of that series. Sure, the power play wasn't able to get it done, but still half of the special teams was able to pull that off. And considering where the Canucks PK was last season, historically awful, worse in the league and then worse in franchise history, the turnaround in that alone is amazing.
Yes. Yes, and it feels like they're like, I know Yannick Hansen has said this on 650 a lot about having players that just take pride in having a really good power play and killing penalties at key moments. You said it felt like the Canucks had that this year, and they didn't during the regular season, and for actually most of the playoffs. It still wasn't performing at the rate that you want, but at the end there, it was they really stepped up, and I think depending on who they bring back, because there's a few players that are part of that penalty kill that are need new contracts. I think you could build off of this and become a team that has at least an above average power play that you don't feel as worried when you take penalties.
Yeah.
And then it's the first true playoff experience for a lot of the players on this roster. Yes, they made the playoffs in 2020, but that's a completely different experience.
Yeah,
like,
and everybody says that now too.
Yeah, so PD is learning from that. Yes, we'll get into him a little bit later, but dealing with a nagging injury or issue since January. Quinn Hughes hadn't really experienced this. Brock Besser hadn't experienced this before. Niels Höglander hadn't experienced this before. Philip Hronek, I don't think has played in the playoffs before either. Like it's sometimes you have to go through it to really figure out what you need to do and how you need to perform, like act, and to make sure that you're getting the right you're getting the performance that you need. So it's a learning experience for the Canucks, and every team goes through that. Every team needs that first trial by fire season, and that's what this one is. This one has been for the Canucks, and you can nitpick about how certain players played. You can nitpick about how things went in certain games and certain series, but it's a learning experience, and these players are going to become better players because of it.
Definitely,
especially the core, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they not only did they have wasn't just dipping their toes into it too. I mean, they faced some really big adversity. Going to a third string goalie, and at one point a phantom penalty call that led to debris on the ice, and still pulling out that game. There was a lot of
teamed in round one.
There was a lot of stuff that in the past we would not have expected the Canucks to pull through. We would have expected them to collapse. So that's a big that's encouraging. That's a big takeaway that hopefully they can build off that. But there's going to be inevitably some changes in the offseason. There's going to it's not going to be exactly the same team, and that there's going to be lots of discussion in the weeks and months to come over that, and leading up to the draft and free agency, and hopefully they can find some pieces that will push this forward.
Yeah, the resiliency of this team over the playoffs and going back into the regular season has been something that if you go back a year to 2 years ago, not something that we would have expected. So there's so many times where things the games would fall off the rails and the team would almost look like they were quitting. And now it's how many times did they come back in these playoffs and just have you, Tyler, you, Chris, myself, sitting there after the game going, what just happened? How am I supposed to sleep?
Yeah.
Especially that game one of round two.
I mean, it was hard to even find words, it'd just be sitting there just like shaking my head like there wasn't even words for some of the moments along the way.
Like
It was just it just took a
speaking-
while to just fully grasp it all.
somehow I was able to fall asleep after game 1 of round 2, but I was doing a 6.5 hour drive back to Kelowna from Valemount, and just the amount of times just listening to the Helen Bro morning show and then just randomly like just being giddy and just be like, woo, on the drive home. Like playoffs does something to me, man.
Yeah. Yeah, it's something else, and I really hope they can build off of this and become better, because I think honestly, when you look at the Pacific Division going into next year, Edmonton should still be good, Vegas should still be good, but the rest of it, it's Seattle. Seattle's gonna be in the mushy middle. Calgary's gonna be in the mushy middle. San Jose and Anaheim are still like they're San Jose is like complete rebuild. Anaheim, I could see push up into that mushy middle depending on how a couple players take a next step next year.
Anaheim is like calf deep. San Jose is like waist deep, if not chest deep.
So like you look at that and you go, there's an opportunity there for the Canucks to be one of the top teams in the division, let alone the conference again next year, if they make the right moves and if certain players take the right steps in their development going into next year.
And Tocchet's able to make the right tweaks to his training camp and like how he wants to kind of prep the players going to next season. Because during his availability today, he was talking about the fact that there's stuff that he learned this season, and there's maybe a different way that he should approach this next training camp as opposed to the one that he just did this past season, because this past season he basically wanted to instill how he wanted the guys to play as far as systems wise. But he was saying that this upcoming one might be a little bit more about like finesse and skill and trying to like change certain ways that they played this year that didn't work for them. So yeah, I have faith in not only the coach, but just the management moving forward. Like there's a lot of question marks this offseason, but I have faith. And I was actually saying this on the last episode that I was on that you weren't on, Tyler. Like even during moments where like I normally in past seasons and past regimes, I'd be shitting my pants and not like, I'd be like, this is over. Like the Canucks screwed this up. But this playoffs, like even when they were down, even when it looked like they were out, I still somehow had faith that they'd pull it out somehow. And a lot of the times they did.
Yeah. And a big part of that is, as you said, Rick Tocchet there, Chris, who was announced yesterday, won the Jack Adams for Coach of the Year.
And it wasn't even close.
No. That's one of those awards that you see like such a wide spread of votes usually, just because it's such a subjective award. But I think it's fully deserved, and I'm actually not surprised it was as lopsided as it was with that voting, because you look at where the Canucks were and you look at where they're at now, and everything you heard throughout the year is how hard the Canucks were to play against, and that's all because of Rick Tocchet, Adam Foote, Sergei Gonchar, Mike Yeo, and the rest of the staff that have worked with this team. The Sedins as well, yeah. Which I do wonder if we're going to see them take a step into a little bit more into the coaching side, maybe even working on the power play, because that was another thing that Rick Tocchet talked about today. The media availability, about how they need to figure that out, and there might be some sort of power play specialist that he brings in. So, because that, as you said, Chris, if they were clipping along at 20% power play, which isn't even that good of a power play in today's day and age, that's pretty average. That that gives them 4 or 5 more goals in
and with how tight the margins were in that series, that could have won them the series.
Yeah. So that is something they definitely need to look at. And we can use that to transition into the media availability from today, which has a few moments where that are definitely worth talking about. Chris, what was one or two that you want to bring up?
I might be cherry picking, and because I'm going first, but Zadorov is always a great for a quote. So, like, sure, the initial one that got sent out about his thing about Calgary not being the biggest one, even in Alberta, initially kind of went viral in a vacuum sort of moment. But then, like, once the additional context came out of like how he basically talked about like how great the Oilers was in the 80s, and like that plays a major factor in that too. Like, kind of took a little bit of the humor away from it. But yeah, just with how great Zadorov is in front of a microphone, I think that's
he knows his audience, eh? Smart dude, like a really smart dude. Anytime he took the mic during the playoff run, you got something, right? There's so much just like cliches and useless sound bites that we get in professional sports, but not from that guy. Like you're getting something of substance from Nikita Zadorov. So that was always the good. You got anything else that you wanted to mention? I'm glad that you brought that up, though.
Yeah, no.
Well, he had another comment that was really good as well. Talking, like, asked about how his value increased in the playoffs because he was an absolute beast in the playoffs, and I think he's like, he basically responded with, how much do you think I should make? I don't know where you get these numbers from. Trees? You got to start listening to Edmonton reporters.
He just torched both media and one just
yeah, both Alberta teams. Yeah,
just take the blowtorch and just holy moly!
I know the comparison gets thrown out about it, like his physical game and how similar it is to Bieksa, but even just how good they both are in front of a microphone, like
they both have a swagger and a confidence, just that it exudes and just brings out the personalities of other people too.
Yeah.
And when we talk about who the Canucks need to bring back, that attitude, that swagger is something that they need. So it's something that they need to make sure they are taking into account.
And so that's part of the reason why Canucks Nation is clamoring to have Zadorov as like the numero uno priority as far as offseason signings. But like, that's just one part of what he brings. There's the entire like on ice part that he showed during the playoffs of how clutch he can be when the game gets big and the moment gets big, and it's important time of the season where you need to be clutch, and he was.
Yeah,
and I appreciated. Go ahead, Sean.
No, you go with that, Tyler.
As far as like him being a quote machine, I mean, not only was he good at coming up with some humorous ones, but I thought he was really he had just the right approach with sensitive topics too. You might recall back in the Nashville series where he was asked about officiating and he
didn't want to get the $25,000 fine.
Yeah, I mentioned $25,000, but I was like, I like this part. Obviously, the players are responsible for what they do on the ice, but the other people on the ice, they have to be responsible too. And and I think that's fair, right? Like it's not saying that there's some screw job that's happening, but I think it's that's a measure of accountability for the league and for the officials that is done in an appropriate fashion. Like he's walking the line anytime you start doing that in public. But that's just how thoughtful he was in front of the press, is that he didn't even have a misstep with that. I mean, he never got into any trouble for that. And I don't think
how the league needs to
was unfair or wrong.
Yeah, talking about how the league needs to protect its investment because he doesn't make make the league as much money.
Yeah. I mean, he's being asked the questions, and he's giving an answer that's honest, but also with with some with a little bit of sauce to it, but also not outrageously accusing the league of some integrity issue. I was very impressed with that, actually, because it's hard to it's hard to find the words in those moments without coming off just pouty and mad about it, and he nailed those moments. And that's important, right, in a Canadian market, especially in Vancouver, where there's a lot of angst over fairness. I think he handled those things very well.
And in terms of that honesty, like the fact that when asked about how much his family loves being in Vancouver and how open he is to coming back, and even the line about like where J-Pat or whoever it was, but where they're getting their numbers from as far as pricing himself out of the market. Like if like the Rick Dollywalls of the world are saying that like, oh, there's no way that we can afford him now, but he sounded pretty open to coming back if they can figure it out. Mm-hmm. So let's have hope.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, so it's one of those things is always take the what you're hearing for reports with a grain of salt, because even the best reporters who are reporting on that, they're only getting part of the story, right? So it's always...
And Rick is hearing it direct from the agent who gets paid based off of how much his clients get paid.
And how do negotiations work? The person who wants to get paid comes in at a higher number. The person who's doing the paying comes in at a lower number, and they meet in the middle.
Yeah.
Or they don't, and it goes off, right? So it's in terms of some of the numbers we've heard for players, I bet you the what they sign for, if they sign with the Canucks, is going to be lower than what we've heard.
And this might be a good segue to maybe switch from Zadorov over to Hronek, in the sense that the numbers that we've heard from his camp is up in like the 8 range. And apparently there was an offer from the Canucks in the 6.5 range. So yeah, just to your point there, like they're probably going to meet in the middle somewhere if Hronek ends up staying.
Yeah. And if Hronek ends up staying, he's going to have to figure out how to handle the media a little bit better.
Yeah, do we want to dip into that there, just for context for people who didn't see it? He was being asked about whether his production fell off
due to an injury or not.
An injury. It was Jeff Patterson that was the reporter there, and then it led to an exchange of Jeff saying that the media gave him space all year, and it was. Pissy was a word that came to mind. It has similar.
It definitely had a "Why are you so pissy, Leon" vibe to it.
Yeah,
sure.
That's Jim Matheson and Leon Draisaitl. Wonder if Hronek was maybe not wanting to dive into that topic for a particular reason. We never know entirely sure why. My opinion is when you look at the guys told how the first part went, how the second part went, how we didn't see very many 1Ts. It's a question that needs to be asked. So there's a polite way of answering the question, or there's a frosty way of answering it. And Hronek's not wrong to take the frosty approach, but probably not the best way of handling that, in my opinion.
And I think to a certain degree, like J-Pat is allowed to ask that question. I think it was more just the tone and the way he worded it. Like it was the execution of asking that question that I think J-Pat kind of failed at, and basically set that moment up for a icy Hronek, typical Hronek sort of icy reply.
Yeah. And it was, to me, it was like the emotions got the better of both of them.
Yep.
In the end there. The line of questioning that Jeff Patterson took was definitely very valid. And whether or not there is a injury or something that hampered Phil Hronek for a little bit there, for a decent amount of the second half, the one I do wonder if he just didn't want to have that as an excuse more than anything else.
Kind of take the opposite approach as what PD did, and obviously we'll get to PD in a minute.
It's not even I think he just didn't want that to have an excuse, and he's made I think if we've learned anything about Philip Roenick this year is he's not the best public speaker, and
or at least he picks and chooses his moments. Like that burn at the end of the Flames game in the last
that's
time
not
we
even
did
public
play.
speaking though. That's chirping, and that's a completely different skill set.
Fair. But what I'm trying to say though is he basically picks and chooses when he likes to talk, and clearly in front of a microphone he kind of gets shy.
Yes. So I think you have to take that into account as well. And if you, I think that's the best way to put it. And like his play, for the most of the part of the second half was solid, but it wasn't at the level that they I think they needed, especially in the playoffs from him. And then he was also forced. He also had bad habits of forcing pucks and plays when there was no need to. So that's just something that he needs. I think he'll over the off season going into next year, once training camp hits and everything. I think that once the dust settles a bit more, I think that he'll be able to, him and the coaching staff should be able to work through that, assuming that he is back. So, because he needs a new contract, and yes, that the contract demands that have been reported out there by either Frank Saravalli or Rick Dollywall are very astronomical, and may or may not lead to the Canucks having to make a tough decision on him. So, and then it was revealed that Elias Pettersson was dealing with a knee issue since January, and it just never got better. He doesn't need a procedure. It just needs to be rested. So that would definitely help the explanation as to why he wasn't the PD that we all know and love when he is on. So hopefully that he can get rested up, and as well as put on some more weight in the off season, some more muscle in the off season. And it's not like he's not strong or anything, as we saw from that nice reverse hit that got called for a quote unquote
charging.
Yeah.
I know, for the amount of knocks he took, for that to be the one that got the debris onto the ice is just, you just have to, you're just like, of course, course. Yeah.
Although I will admit, Tyler, like the fact that even you were, and you being like our official resource and whatnot, like the fact that even you was like, well, if they're going to throw debris on the ice, at least it's for that call.
Yeah, because I can't think of ever any precedent for that interpretation of the charging rule being applied. Can you guys ever think of one like that?
I've seen the whole they skated into a player and they jumped into the hit.
Just jump from
because then you're just parsing every single word of that rule. And
I try to put myself in that scenario. If I called that, and I'm the guys that have had me for games know I've had my overreaction moments over the years. Okay. If I called that, the crucifixion that would be going on would just be like,
yeah,
you know what I mean? It's just like, yeah, I called it phantom. It should not have been called a penalty. They called it. I understand that the wording of the charging rule about jumping into an opponent, but that's not it. If there's no past precedent that anybody watching can think of, it's not a penalty.
Yeah, even Merrick on the most recent episode of 32 Thoughts actually said, like, looking back at it now that like everyone's cooled down from it at the moment and whatnot, like, was it technically the right call? Maybe. But in reality, like, should you make that call moving forward? Probably not.
Well, I credit to the Canucks though. They killed the penalty. They moved on from it. The place was hostile. They won the game, and that's to me that's what I take so much pride in as a fan right now, and what has me encouraged going forward is that this victim mentality that's often creeped into the not just the fan base is always going to be the fans, but That's crept into the team in the past. Sometimes even hearing their public comments about, how things are. There was never excuses for stuff like that this year. There is none of that victim mentality from the team.
And I said on the
At
last
least not
episode,
outwardly.
yeah, I even mentioned on the last episode I was on, I was like, even the Oilers are doing that. Like the Canucks, like the fact that we were expecting the Canucks of yesteryear that used to do that, like this season, the Canucks did not do that at all. But the Oilers definitely were guilty. Like the amount of whining
that
you
Mark
could see
Spector
of
article
McDavid.
just so ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he was doing it to generate a reaction. That's what columnists do, right? So, and boy, did he ever succeed at generating a reaction.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I know we're on a tangent here, but we're going to need Heidi to control us. He's really stretching the reality on what the Roger Nielsen statue and the Towel Power represents. But when he says it's always about the officiating in Vancouver, he is correct. There are prominent people in the media that want to make that a storyline when they're already looking at the assignments and they see Kelly Sutherland there, and you've got prominent people in the press making that a narrative. Spector's not
Like
wrong.
Harrison Price.
So that's how I felt about it.
Yeah. No,
I think we were all of the officials that were under fire throughout the 2 rounds over dubious calls or just their reputation or what have you. Kelly Sutherland, Garrett Rank, Dan O'Rourke, who made the call of the phantom charging call. They have all made it through to the next round. Make that what you will, in terms of how the NHL likes to operate. They're all veterans, especially in the case of Kelly Sutherland. One of the few guys that's actually a good enough skater to stay out of the damn way during games. Like the amount of times the guys were physically in the way, interfering with the play. I'm pulling my hair out watching it. But
is it just due to how fast the game is nowadays, though? Like, is that part of the reason?
I feel like they're either being coached differently, and it's causing them to be in the way more, or it's just something that supervision is just not paying enough attention to. But to me, it's fixable.
So it's not just
like trying to pick out infractions, and the speed of the play is harder to fix. But to actually, just get your positioning and mechanics sorted out so you're not in the way as much, that is fixable. And I don't know why it's not being fixed. That's a surprise to me. But maybe it's just a sign of, maybe the skating ability and the talent pool is dropping off a little bit, and they're being caught flat-footed more often, and then now they're in trouble to get out of the way. Like they should be going behind. We're really into the nitty gritty here, but the referee should be crossing behind the net more often to stay out of the way. Now it takes good judgment of the play and anticipating the play, but this is the NHL. It shouldn't be that hard to anticipate the play. I mean, a U11 game where it's sloppy and their kids and they can't receive a pass is one thing, but in the NHL, they should be able to anticipate the play and stay out of the way. I don't know. Had to get on.
Here's out of the ditch.
All right.
If I'm the supervisor, I'm just losing my mind at this, because at some point there is going to be this get in the way moment that's going to directly lead to a very important goal, and the league's going to have egg on its face.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They were lucky, frankly, that didn't become a bigger issue.
Mm-hmm.
Fair, but I guess to get it as somewhat back on topic, is there more from the media availability that we wanted to touch on?
I would say the standards that the organization seemed to project. You see Patrick Galvin talking about, it was only the second round, but that their season ended. I think just the players projected. They're not satisfied with just getting this far, right? They didn't walk away from it feeling like they're happy with some Cinderella run here. It's like, no, we got work to do, and here's what we need to do. And I think everybody had a very good perspective on what happened, and and there's a lot of I think a lot of could see how well the team came together and the buy-in with the coaching, and it feels like there was the talk about putting respect back into the jersey and the logo, and it feels like Vancouver's a place guys want to be staying and guys want to come and play for, and the organization's back in a pretty good place right now, just in totality, just kind of from what I gathered out of it today.
Yeah, and you were right in the sense of like you expect to hear that from the players and the coach, but I was a little surprised that Patrick Allvin just kind of came out and said that to start the media availability. Because to me, like with how, I mean, yes, there was a lot of good things that we did right this season, but you could say there was a fair amount of luck that also went in the Canucks' favor this season. And part of me is wondering, like, is there going to be regression next season, especially dealing with how many UFAs that we have this offseason and how we like rebuild that team? Like, it's almost kind of Allvin's adding pressure onto himself for next season. Like, if he isn't able to produce a playoff team next season, is he going to basically be eating those words that he just said this morning?
Yeah, but that's fine. I mean, there's got to be high standards, right? And I mean, I think you look all the way through the organization now. We finally got, it seems like some consistency there, right? Jim Rutherford, Patrick Allvin, Rick Tocchet, the players, the leadership of the team, the minor league system, like everything is so aligned right now, and they've gotten lots out of it. I mean, the coach of the year winner usually is the coach that got the most out of their team, and boy, did they ever get the most out of not just the NHL roster, but even the guys that they summoned from the depth pool were helpful too. So, you don't want to now let standards loosen and have complacency set in, right? When you've just made all this progress. So no, I think the tone's great, and yeah, they might not do as well next year. That's fine though.
And I think a lot of that sort of that luck that was the puck luck that got at the beginning of the season, where they scored a lot more goals than they did in the second half. The way the Canucks play now and how that is a lot more indicative of what they are as a team than they did at the beginning of the season. And that is still a style and a brand of hockey that can win. So going into next year, they've got a lot of decisions to make. And I think one of them got easier because of what happened in the playoffs, and that is in net. Yes, Demko will still be number one, but Artie Shelov is going to be the number two net going into next year. At least it has the full inside track there. And no, there is no realistic reason to trade either of them this offseason.
I'm smiling for those that are watching this, because this was a thing that we talked about yesterday. Please continue.
There is the goaltending. The goaltending market in the NHL is so fickle, and at the best of times, even when it is a seller's market, the return is usually underwhelming. And that's not going to be this year. This offseason, there's going to be multiple top-end goaltenders available or potentially available. You look at Boston. I do not think they can bring back Linus Ullmark and Jeremy Swayman next year as a duo. It just doesn't work in the salary cap era. Elvis Merzlikins wants out of Columbus. John Gibson has been rumored on the block for multiple years now. Jacob Markstrom there's a good chance he's out of Calgary as well. Let alone there's talk that Nashville might look at moving UC Saros because the unmade bed may be made now in Askarov. So there's enough options out there that it does. Like if you look at the rumored return for Markstrom, which was Alexander Holtz and a first round pick, that doesn't make the Canucks better.
No, when you see that, you look at that and have to be like, okay, forget it. The reason why this came up as a discussion was Donnie and Dolly, I think a couple days ago, had a poll question about should they trade either Demko or Shelovs. I also had the post-series feeling that Shilov's performance gave the organization more to think about, which I still think is true, because maybe down the line at some point this comes up. But yeah, if you do that market analysis as John just did, it's not the right time to make that change. We also don't really know what they have in Nikita Tolopilo, who's their fourth goalie. Imagine being him. Hey, get the call to Nashville. You're on the bench. Just like, I have no NHL experience, and I might have to go in if Shilov gets hurt. Yeah. So, if the organization has a lot of faith in where he's at with his development, that factors in as well. But there's so many what if that.
But even
this
then,
was
he was,
even the thought of moving a Shilovs or a Demko was never in anybody's wildest thoughts until we saw Shilov's performance, and now it is an area of where the organization can do their evaluation and see what the possibilities may be if somebody comes with an offer.
And yeah, especially with the cap crunch going into next season, like it just makes financial sense that you let DeSmith walk because he's going to demand at least $1.5 million, if not more. And then the fact that you can have a waiver exempt and cheaper Shilovs as your backup behind Demko next season, to me, that just makes sense.
Shilovs does need a new deal next year, but it's not going to be as much as what DeSmith would be looking for because of his RFA status. Yeah. So yeah, you are going to have a very you can honestly sign if you can sign him to a 2-year deal that lines up with the expiry of Demko's deal, and potentially, and he could be the heir apparent there in 2 years. So his time will come if he continues to develop and everything there. So
correct me if I'm wrong, is that the same approximate timeline that basically Demko had pushing Markstrom out of the market?
About, yeah, and that's usually what it takes is you establish yourself in the AHL, and then you make the jump up to the NHL, and you're not going to be given the starter's role right out of that. You have to earn it, and especially if you're coming up against a Vezina caliber goaltender with Demko and Markstrom in the past, and now you might even see that with Dustin Wolf in Calgary too. So I think it just the timeline, Matt, makes so much sense just to go with them as your 1-2 punch in net, and if Shilovs can continue to develop and continue to be a solid goaltender for the Canucks going into next year, that allows them to rest Demko more going in throughout the season, and maybe he won't be as susceptible to these injuries as he has been the past few years.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt about it that they would be willing to play Shilovs more than they were willing to play DeSmith this past year.
Yeah, maybe like a 50-30 sort of split as far as games.
Yeah. So, and then
more than that, but yeah,
it could be. And I guess I think that the next stop would be is Philip Hronek. What do you do with him? Because I think that you have to make a decision there with him before you have, and I think that affects your what you're doing with your UFAs, your key UFAs, specifically on the blue line. And as I said, as we talked about earlier, the rumored $8 million cap hit that is out there, I think, is unpalatable. It's not, I don't think it happens regardless of where he signs. I just don't see that happening, especially with the fall off in the second half of the season, at least production wise. So
not only that, but the amount of $9 million defensemen in the league that have had contracts that have basically soured after they sign those deals. Like, I feel like there's going to be a bunch of teams that are going to be gun shy as far as overpaying for offensive defensemen.
Or even just not even just like a true offensive defenseman, one more of a two-way guy, which is what Hronek really is. He's a good puck mover, but he also he's thick. Like, he's not super tall, but he's thick. He can handle it himself physically.
He's stocky.
And And he's not your true puck mover. Like he's not your true elite puck mover that and offensive defenseman that his partner Quinn Hughes, like even an Evan Bouchard or even a Noah Dobson or something like that, let alone the Campbell Cars and Miro Heiskanen's, Adam Fox's. There's a few others you can name that I just,
if we're going to make a comparison, would it be fair to almost say that he's if Hughes is Bouchard, Ekholm is Hronek?
That's what the Canucks need him to be. Someone who can move the puck, who can chip in offensively at a decent rate, but is still can play physical, is gritty, and is solid defensively. And that's what he can, and he's shown that he can do that. And if you can get him to locked in at a sort of a 7 million, like low 7 million range, at the most for a while, for like 4+ years, then I think that works. Like he's still young, he's still in his mid-20s.
Yeah,
so you have to remember that.
If the initial offers from both sides meet in the middle, that's basically about 7.25. So yeah.
So if you can make that, if you can get that done, that makes a lot of sense to me. That being said, if he is going to play hardball, I think you have to look. I think they have to start looking at getting creative with some trades here, and look at bringing in you. But if you do that, you do have to make sure that in one of those trades, you're bringing in another right shot defenseman that is close to the caliber of Hronek, and that's going to be tough.
And sorry, prospect-loving fans, but Wielander is not going to be ready at the NHL level for probably another 2 to 3 seasons.
Or like at most, if he could be NHL bound by the end of next year, but he will not be at the level that they need him to be for at least a year or two after that.
Yeah, kind of like how Quinn Hughes took a couple seasons to get his mojo going at the NHL level.
Yeah, I definitely agree with all of that. They got to find a way to get Hronek re-signed at an affordable rate. I mean, the look of him and Quinn Hughes together was a success, and what they gave up to bring Phil in. You want to stick with that, I think, for a little while longer. That'll be very fascinating to see. And then, as you said, Sean, everything else kind of falls into place around that transaction.
Yeah, because then there's the list of unrestricted free agents that the Canucks have to make decisions on going into the off season. Up front, you've got Elias Lindholm, Teddy Bluger, Dakota Joshua, and Sam Lafferty. And then you've also on the blue line, you've got Nikita Zadorov, Tyler Myers, Ian Cole, and Mark Friedman as the NHL level defensemen that are or close enough with Mark Friedman. But the key ones to look at are Lindholm, Joshua up front, Lindholm, Joshua, and Bluger up front, and then Myers and Zadorov on the blue line. So I think for me personally, I think personally the number one priority is Zadorov.
Yes. Yeah.
I think we're all in agreement there.
Yeah.
Yes.
We've got to represent Kevin's point of view here. He had Lindholm as his top priority, and that's a fair point for me.
And that makes a lot of sense to me. I just don't know if that is realistic there. I do think that he's going to command a lot on the open market, and I think he knows that, especially after the playoffs that he had.
Yeah.
So I think it's my only thing with Lindholm, and from a lot of players have said, they seem to have liked playing in Vancouver, and especially with the playoff vibe. And I wonder if there might be some sort of unfinished business sort of mentality with a few of these UFAs. Zadorov, I could see that for sure. Tyler Myers is he's got roots in Vancouver and the Okanagan now. I wouldn't be surprised if they bring him back. Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if they bring him back at a more of a discounted rate, because I think in the open market he probably get 3.5, 4. Yeah. I wonder if they're able to knock off $500,000 to $1 million off of that.
I mean, to steal a phrase that was more popular back in the 2011 era, kind of like a modern version of what we called the hometown discount, I believe is what was referred to back then.
Yeah, and then
that usually involves no clauses, but yeah.
Yes, that is the one issue there.
Yeah.
I think the other key decision there is Dakota Joshua. Are the Canucks able to potentially go out and find another version of him that would another cheaper version of him that could play on the third line, or
which Pauline even kind of alluded to?
Yeah, 3.5 million that he that is rumored that sort of people are sort of offering out there. Is that fair for Dakota Joshua, who has really only done it for one season? So I think that he's the one that I think I'm most interested in terms of what happens. Because you know what you have in Myers, you know what you have in Zadorov, you know what you have in even Teddy Bluger, and his contracts, I think, if they bring him back, isn't going to be that onerous. But you don't, as good as Joshua has been, he's only done it for one season, and you just wonder if it was a flash in the pan, or if he can become a consistent physical force that can pot goals like he has. Because if he can, and they can get him signed to a 3-4 year deal in the low $3 million range, that is going to be a really good signing for the Canucks if that's the case. So
yeah, you have to have some restraint there, right? Because a guy of Dakota Joshua's caliber to be, heading for unrestricted free agent now as a 28-year-old. I mean, this is like how realistically. I mean, how much further is his trajectory going to go before the decline starts to happen, right?
That is
funny how guys can really show in a contract year, and then they get into their 30s, and it's just not going to be able to get back to that same level. So.
And if we want to sustain the magic of this season, like his chemistry with Garland, like maybe he will be willing to maybe eat a little on the AAV if they give him extra term, maybe just to kind of keep that line going.
That'd be a way to get it done.
Yeah. So
it has to be said here as well that the cap penalty for the Ekman-Larsson buyout jumps up considerably here. Starting next season, and then it goes up even further.
The most painful one is 2 seasons away, right?
Yeah. This not next season, it's the year after, and the year after that, where it's going to be a
3 1/3, I think.
Almost
this upcoming season, the 24-25 season, it's just over 2.3 million a cap hit, and then after that, for the 2 seasons after that, it's a just over 4.75 million.
And I think this last year it was only like $700,000 or something as a cap hit. So it's
we haven't felt the pain of that buyout yet, is what we're trying to get at.
When you're a team that's right up against it, that's not insignificant.
Although we'll be lucky about that cap era anymore.
Yeah.
Yes. What is nice about when that buyout does jump up, the Tucker Pullman.
Yes.
The Tucker Pullman contract will be up, so he's got 1 more year left. He's going to be on LTIR unless they're able to find a way to move him, so that they can have a little more cap flexibility. So.
And what's he on? He had like 2.5, 3, somewhere on there.
2.5, yeah. So. And then with that, so as in an ideal world, Lindholm's should be right up there for the priority. But for me, I think Zadorov, he's a culture carrier. that you need to have. His brashness, his swagger, his just his physicality, and his ability to step up in the moment and embrace the moment, I think, is something that they need to make sure that they keep it within that locker room. Tyler Myers also has proven to be a very important player on this team. And if they can keep him at a decent cap hit, that makes a lot of sense. And then Joshua's, I think that again the key player to watch there, because there's just this with everyone else, as I said, you know what they are. You can make an argument you don't quite still know what Joshua is long term. Where do the Canucks need to improve going into next season?
Middle six scoring.
Yeah, I think that's. I mean, it kind of seems like an easy answer to say that, but yeah, it's kind of funny, right? Like we came into this season, Sean. I think you and I did a two-person show before the season with concerns about defense, and then defense was great for the Canucks this year, and it really shown in the playoffs. So that doesn't feel like as much of a concern now.
With half the defense being UFAs.
Yeah, but they have now the wiggle room to kind of put their mark on it and do it the way they want to do it, as opposed to this management group inheriting what was there before.
True.
A la Tyler Myers, but and I had nothing against Tyler Myers. He's just one of the bigger contracts from before. Yeah, a little more scoring depth, a little more size, a little more speed in the lineup. But just, I mean, I know those are all buzz phrases, but those are the areas for me. You know, goaltending is the depth is there. They've got their core of stars. And then they're going to be able to bring some of that defense back, but not all of it. So those are the areas.
Yeah, I feel like they're fairly strong in the important areas. It's more like out at the edges that they need to kind of tighten up, if you will.
The key spot the Canucks need to improve on is to find a true staple winger for Petey. You've got Miller and Besser together. You had whoever it was, whether it was Bluger or Lindholm.
That's Garland and Joshua.
And Joshua.
We need that dynamic duo on the PD line,
on the PD line, you need to find it, whether maybe that is Hoagie going into next season after an off season and figuring that out, but they need to figure that for the Canucks to take the next step. That's the key position that they need to solidify going into next season, is who is Petey's running mate, who is, regardless of who's on the other wing, he's always with insert player here. So I think for me that is the big gaping hole in this lineup.
Yeah.
And considering how much. Sorry, just to finish off that point, considering how consistent both Garland and assuming we are able to re-sign Joshua, how consistent they were able to be on the third line. When I was talking about middle six scoring, I was basically meaning, on PD's line.
The hockey math that we always go through when there's 12 players 12 forwards on the ice or on the team, and you talk about top six, middle six, and bottom six.
And the Venn diagram overlap.
So, and then expect the unexpected going into this offseason, right? Because there's definitely moves that we did not expect happening basically since Alvin took over. They traded for Veronik at the trade deadline last year. I don't think anyone really thought they'd go after a player like Ilya Mikheyev in the season previous.
It might be Alvin running the ship by himself at this point, but it still has Rutherford in the organization. And with Rutherford, like you said, expect the unexpected.
Yeah. Well, and now there's certainly I don't know. I mean, you have to have an eye on the future, and there's got to be discipline in running the team that way. But if there was any doubt about them looking towards taking a swing at it here, the time is now. So,
well, this past season, it went from Trader Jim to Trader Pat.
Yeah, well, that is the thing, right? Like, Patrick Allvin's not afraid to make moves. And
He was the only GM making moves for the first 3 months of the season.
Yes. Yes. But yeah, I think is there anyone out there? I know Kevin said he thinks the Canucks might be in on a Jonathan March or so if he makes it to the UFA market. Is there anything out there that you might, even if it's not a name, but an idea that you could see happen?
I hadn't thought much about that myself, Chris.
Sorry, I will admit I was multitasking. What was the question?
It's sort of a player out there on the market, either specific or player type.
Oh,
you think
like I don't have any names in particular. Like I know Kevin is always kind of chess thinking in his head as far as what moves we could make, but I haven't given it that much thought yet. So yeah, I don't really have any names yet. Maybe ask me that in the middle of the summer and I'll have a better answer.
I do wonder. This is assuming that they bring back Bluger, and they're okay with Bluger as being their third line center, not bringing in someone who could be not going to three deep with Lindholm. I do wonder, and this isn't necessarily too unexpected with the history that they have with this player, but maybe Jay Gensel. I think I wouldn't be surprised if they try and bring him over, because you look at their history with him in Pittsburgh. He's a scoring winger that they could put with Petey. What was that? And I said that was the gaping hole in the lineup. And if you can run, you can have that third line of Joshua, Bluger, and Garland. This is all blue sky thinking, right? Yep. Everything goes right. And then you've got your duos of Miller and Besser and Petey and Gensel as in your top six. That depth is scary.
Yeah.
And then I think the other sort of expect the unexpected, and it all comes down to whether or not they can make a deal with Roenick. And if not, I could see a big swing of the fence in a trade with that involves Roenick. So
one other thing I wanted to add in there too was, and Patrick Allvin hinted at leaving opportunities for some of their prospect pool to push for roster spots next year. It'll be interesting to see if there's a breakthrough from someone such as Jonathan Gary-Mackey or one of those other names that have been tossed around at various points in time. I mean, can they have a good off season and come into training camp and really knock the socks off of the brass and grab an opportunity that would be huge. There's a lot of unknown with that, but when you're going to be tight on salary cap space, that's how you get some more relief. So be interested to see what happens there. I don't think I've ever, as a Canuck watcher, had as much confidence in the depth of their system than I do now, and it can still get deeper yet. So, that remains to be seen, but I'm hopeful that we'll see a surprise there too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think we've covered basically all the Canucks for right now. There will be more news coming out. That we've got the Norris still needs to be announced, and Quinn Hughes has been, I think, a pretty odds-on favorite to win that this year.
Yeah, I believe just for clarity, I believe it's the awards night itself in which the big trophies are awarded. So the Hart, the Norris, the Vezina, the Calder, the Ted Lindsay Award. There may be some others that I'm forgetting there, but that'll be happening after the Stanley Cup final.
Yeah, because I was starting to wonder, like the fact that they've already named the Selke and the Jack Adams. I was like, are they not doing the NHL awards this season?
Yeah, this has been the case now for a little bit, but the top awards they're gonna wait till the awards night for those.
Fair.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's a few other sort of just news and notes, and I'll just quickly run through them. Yes, we got Oilers and Stars in the West Final, and the Panthers beat the Rangers in Game 1 of the East Final. Oilers and Stars are in overtime. And then the Lightning reacquired Ryan McDonough after he expressed his his want to
Interesting
be
lead
traded
matchup.
back out.
It's always a nice story, right? Like when that something like that can be worked out, and you see that the respect for a player and his career, and management showing a little humanity with that, and then still being able to get a decent return. Everybody walks away happy from that. Good for Ryan McDonough.
Yep.
Yep.
And then the coaching carousel and announcements has started. Hiller is staying in LA, so expect some more 1-3-1 out of the Kings going into the next year. Then you had Travis Green to the Ottawa Senators, Craig Berube to the Toronto Maple Leafs, and then Sheldon Keefe to the New Jersey Devils.
Yeah,
So
I'd also not mention there Rod Brindamore signing, I believe, a 5-year deal with the Carolina Hurricanes. I mean, that's a surprise, especially from Carolina, because I thought they were going to be pretty shrewd with him.
He took, as is always mentioned when a Rod Brindamore contract is talked about, he took care of his assistants.
Yeah, that's yes, absolutely. I really thought there was a good chance Rod the Bod was headed for Seattle to reunite with Ron Francis and be closer to of course, as many people know, Rod Brindamore's got roots in Campbell River, so closer to home that way. But good for him to re-up with Carolina. There, he's got a great program going there.
Makes you wonder if Carolina's maybe turning a new leaf. They went big in on the rentals at trade deadline, and now they're giving long-term contracts.
Yeah.
Carolina's the team to watch this offseason with the amount of free agents that they're dealing with.
Yeah, they're almost the Eastern version of the Canucks in that regard.
Jake Gensel, they've got Marty Necas, who needs a new contract. He's an RFA. So they're a team to watch in the offseason for sure. I'm not sure when Kevin will be back to talk Flames. We're probably, in terms of Canucks talk, unless something major happens between and now and the now in the draft, I think we'll probably be taking a little bit of a breather, but we will probably still come on maybe in the next couple weeks to just at least discuss any other news that does come out. It's time to take a breather, decompress, and
maybe we'll do one at the end of this coming round to preview the Stanley Cup final or something like that. But yeah,
I want to just say before we go, so everybody knows this, I want to say, Sean, how proud I am of you this season with the refs. Okay, you've listened to me. I'm not, not everything I say is gospel that should be listened to per se, but you were very calm and understood, I think, more clearly why things go the way they go. Obviously, there were some hot moments there in the group chat during the playoff run, but you did very well. You weren't a fan that made it the victim mentality all the time. You were frustrated when there's reason to be frustrated, but also I think you grew. You grew as a referee watcher, so I'm proud of you for that.
Also,
I want everybody to know that.
I've ever been someone who says like fully that the refs cost the game. But there are times there, yes. But for the most part, I've always been like, that was a shitty call or whatever, and like all that. But yeah, I've definitely because we all our talks, Tyler. I definitely have a different view on it all now, and plus I'm just so over seeing everyone say that that the refs are the worst. Yeah. Regardless of what sport it is, because baseball, they're the worst. Basketball, they're the worst.
Yeah.
Football, they're the worst.
I mean, it's even getting to the point where random people on X.com are like, "Okay, enough." But no, that's good. I know it's kind of for a chuckle here, but I think you did very well.
Yeah, as far as speaking of turning a new leaf, like how many hot-headed Sean moments did we have on the podcast this season versus previous seasons?
Yeah.
I mean, if we're going to be real here, a lot of that is mental health.
Yeah. Well,
and
mental health and
what's really good for mental health is taking those little those nice barbells and those dumbbells and just lifting them.
Yeah.
and then putting them back down, and then lifting them again,
You got to
and
get
then
it
putting them
out.
back down.
All right, let's wrap this up, fellas.
All right. Well, how do we follow everyone?
I'm on x.com at tnoble, TNOBLE.
I am on all the social medias at Schneids.
I am on the x.com at BeardyCanucks03. You can follow Kevin on the social medias at KEVOLE. Devin Gordhouse09 on the x.com. Yes,
He'll be back
he will
eventually,
making
right?
Eventually. Maybe it may be in the fall once he's married, but it'll happen. We promise he will come back. You can follow us at Shifts and Pucks on x.com, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. Thank you for a great season. Thank you for tuning in. We will see you next time. Bye for now.